From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Friday, November the 20th, 2020. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo departed Israel today, heading for Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and then to Qatar. Pompeo, as we reported to you, made several historic visits while in Israel, including to the Golan Heights and to a Jewish settlement in the West Bank, and declared that products made in such settlements be labeled as made in Israel, also declaring the BDS, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions campaign that seeks to delegitimize the state of Israel, as anti-Semitic. B'nai B'rith International wrote yesterday, "We commend these significant moves today by the White House to label the BDS movement as anti-Semitic and to allow products made in the West Bank to carry a Made in Israel label, reaffirming the alliance between the U.S. and Israel." The American Jewish Committee thanked Pompeo, tweeting, "For your consistent support of Israel and opposition to BDS. While we await the specifics of the proposal," the AJC tweeted, "one thing couldn't be clearer. The BDS movement, which seeks the destruction of Israel, is inherently anti-Semitic." San Francisco State University's Student Association approved a BDS resolution on Wednesday that calls for the university to withdraw from investments in companies that do business in Jewish settlements in the West Bank. It was spearheaded by the university's General Union of Palestine Students. SFSU's Hillel Executive Director Rachel Nielsen-Ralston said this resolution has sadly had a real and negative impact on our students' wellness and experience of their campus. But she said BDS's real danger is that it seeks to influence the open hearts and minds of tomorrow's leaders from a one-sided, deeply biased narrative against Israel. Now, if you recall back in September, the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program at the school invited Palestinian terrorist Leila Khaled to speak at a virtual event, which for the most part did not succeed after Jewish organizations' efforts against it, including from B'nai B'rith, who tweeted, "From hosting convicted terrorist Leila Khaled to passing an anti-Semitic BDS resolution, SFSU student government adds fuel to the fire. This resolution will further divide students and signal to Jewish and non-Jewish students alike that its campus is a hostile one." The United Nations General Assembly's Third Committee overwhelmingly voted to approve a draft resolution calling for Palestinian self-determination. 163 in favor, 5 against, with 10 abstentions. It also called for an end to the quote-unquote Israeli occupation and a just and lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Israel has long maintained that any peace agreement must be made through direct negotiations between the parties and not determined by outside bodies. The U.S. joined Israel in voting against the resolution. Canada voted for it, to the dismay of several Jewish organizations in Canada, like the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs and B'nai B'rith Canada, as well as the Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, who jointly said the resolution fails to affirm Jewish self-determination in the indigenous and ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, intentionally erasing historical Jewish connections to Jerusalem, including the Western Wall, Judaism's holiest site. CEO of the Friends of the Wiesenthal Center, Michael Levitt, wrote, "By supporting this resolution, Canada is providing ammunition to those who seek to delegitimize and demonize the state of Israel, which ultimately sets back the prospects for peace in the region." On Wednesday, the United Nations Second Committee overwhelmingly passed an Israeli-led resolution. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, tweeted that the Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Development resolution was approved with the overwhelming support of 144 nations. He called it a great success for Israel and all those who care about the future and building a sustainable and inclusive economy. Israel's UN mission explained that the resolution supports the UN's Agenda 2030 for sustainable development and focuses on actions needed for the post-COVID-19 recovery. The Anti-Defamation League concluded its Never Is Now summit on anti-Semitism and hate, held virtually this year, of course, because of the coronavirus pandemic. Last night, the ADL presented their 2020 International Leadership Award to former world chess champion Garry Kasparov. Kasparov now serves as chairman of the Human Rights Foundation. He was honored for, the ADL said, his global leadership and work on the global stage. Kasparov, in his acceptance speech, referred to being a Jewish Armenian growing up in Azerbaijan and of the rise in anti-Semitism around the world. He said, "Violence is never the beginning. Murder is never the beginning. Ignorance is. Hatred is. Tolerating intolerance," he said, "that is where it starts." Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Friday, November the 20th. Live Shabbat services are coming up at 6 o'clock from New York City's Central Synagogue, followed by Kabbalat Shabbat services from the Hampton Synagogue. At 8:30, philanthropist Charles Bronfman speaks at the 92nd Street Y, followed by the documentary 1 out of 10. At 10:30, it's New Jewish Cinema with award-winning filmmaker Michael King, director of The Rescuers. Then at 11, it's a replay of the Hampton Synagogue, followed by a replay of the Central Synagogue services. And coming up next, it's a look at this week's Torah portion, followed by Shabbat during COVID-19. And that's the JBS News Update for Friday, November the 20th, 2020. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy, stay well, and Shabbat Shalom.